Welcome to RPG Lorekeeper. Every week we unravel new tales from the Elder Scrolls, with more RPG adventures on the way. Hit subscribe, give a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and your voice helps forge what comes next. The wind that scoured the Pale was a blade of ice, sharp enough to peel flesh from bone. It howled through the mountain pass, carrying the scent of pine and ancient frost. Galmar's patrol pushed against it, a line of weary stormcloaks wrapped in bearskins, their breath pluming like dragon steam in the frigid air. They were hunting a rogue ice wraith, but what they found was something far colder. It was a barrow, half buried in a drift of snow, its stone entrance carved with faded runes that seemed to writhe just at the edge of vision. It wasn't on any of their maps. Talos's breath, another one, grumbled Hroldir, his beard a solid plate of ice. Place is more tomb than mountain. But this one felt different. The usual sense of dread that clung to Nordic ruins was absent, replaced by a profound and unsettling silence. The wind itself seemed to die at the threshold. Inside, the air was still, heavy and sterile. Torches were lit, their flames casting long, dancing shadows that the darkness seemed eager to swallow. There were no Draugr in their dusty alcoves, no skeletal guardians to challenge their intrusion. The only sound was the crunch of their own boots on the frozen floor. "It's empty," whispered Isra, her hand resting on the pommel of her sky-forged steel sword. Completely empty. They moved deeper into a circular chamber dominated by a single, monolithic slab of obsidian-like stone. It had no carvings, no altar, nothing to suggest its purpose. It simply was. As they circled it, Hroldir shivered, though not from the cold. I can't remember the name of my village," he said, his voice a tight knot of confusion. "It's just gone." Galmar turned to him, a scowl on his weathered face. "The frost is addling your wits, boy. We're all from—" He stopped, his eyes unfocused for a moment, staring at the torchlight reflecting off the strange, silent stone. The name of Eastmarch, the very heart of their rebellion, was a ghost on his tongue. A word he knew but could not speak. A wave of vertigo swept through the chamber. Isra looked at her companions, at their familiar faces, and for a terrifying second, she couldn't recall a single one of their names. There was only the oppressive, crushing silence of the barrow, a silence that wasn't just an absence of sound, but an absence of self. The Arcanium was a tomb of forgotten words, its air thick with the dust of centuries and the dry, papery scent of ancient scrolls. Elara Veleth, a Dunmer scholar with eyes the color of embers, preferred this silence to the boisterous clamor of the Hall of the Elements below. For weeks, she had been consumed by a riddle brought back by a terrified Jarl's courier from the Pale. A tale of stormcloaked soldiers found wandering in a stupor, their memories scoured clean as wind-swept stone. The courier's report spoke of a barrow that hummed with a profound emptiness, a void that seemed to swallow thought itself. Erlara's fingers, stained with ink and ash, traced the brittle edges of a map of Nordic ruins. The barrow was unrecorded, a ghost on the landscape. Her research had led her down a rabbit hole of obscure magical theory, far from the grand arcane arts. She was now deep in the forbidden archives, surrounded by texts on soul-trapping, memory-weaving, and the esoteric disciplines of the Psijic order. Most were fragmented, their meanings lost to time, or redacted by a careful, ancient hand. But she had found a pattern, a recurring reference to a concept she'd never encountered, a Nuic unnaming. She unrolled a particularly fragile scroll, its parchment thin as a moth's wing. It was a partial transcript from a long-dead Psijic lore master. "The Arcanum of Erasure," she read aloud, her voice a low murmur that barely disturbed the dust motes dancing in the candlelight. "Not to destroy a soul, but to unwrite it from the Song of Orbis, to sever its threads from past, present, and future. The soul remains a hollow vessel, its identity scattered. It is a spell of absolute silence, for to speak its name is to risk invoking its opposite." The text ended there, the rest torn away. A chilling realization began to coalesce in Elara's mind. This wasn't a curse of madness or a simple memory-draining spell. It was something far more fundamental. The Psijics had theorized a way to remove a being's very essence from the Mundus, to make it as if they had never existed at all. The soldiers weren't just forgetting, They were being forgotten by reality itself. Her gaze drifted to a star chart of the northern constellations. If such a spell existed, if it were active now in that silent barrow, it was more than an arcane curiosity. It was a weapon capable of unmaking the world, one memory at a time. The heat of the Anaqueen Desert was a physical weight, pressing down from a sky the color of bleached bone. Jazago, a mage on a long and winding journey from Winterhold to his ancestral homeland, had seen many strange sights, but none so disquieting as the caravan of the Painted Paws. He found them by the grace of the twin moons, their silent silhouettes stark against the dunes. The Senchirat, massive battle cats that served as both mounts and guardians, lay curled in the sand, their powerful muscles slack, their usual rumbling growls absent. They were not asleep, but simply waiting. The merchants and their guards huddled around cold, unlit campfires. Sacks of moon sugar, bolts of vibrant silk, and crates of exotic spices sat untouched. No one had been robbed, no battle had been fought. But the life of the caravan was gone. Jazago approached an old Khajiit, his fur a once proud silver, now matted with sand. The elder stared into the middle distance, his gaze as empty as the desert horizon. "5 claws greet you, elder," Jazago said, his voice soft. "This one sees your caravan is troubled. Is there aid you require?" The old Khajiit turned his head slowly. His eyes, normally sharp and full of the spark of 1,000 tales, were dull, milky pools. "This one," he began, his voice a dry rasp like sand skittering across rock. "This one has fur and a tail." He looked down at his own hands as if they were foreign objects. He did not know his own name, nor the names of his kin who sat beside him. He had forgotten the rhythms of the clan, the stories of the Mene, the warmth of the sands he had traveled his entire life. Jazago moved through the camp, a cold dread coiling in his stomach that had nothing to do with the desert night. A warrior clutched the hilt of a gleaming scimitar, but had forgotten how to draw it. A weaver stared blankly at her loom, the intricate patterns of her life's work, now a meaningless tangle of threads. They were all hollow shells. Their pasts, their purposes, their very identities had been scoured away, leaving behind only the husk of who they once were. The vibrant, chaotic, story-filled culture of his people had been replaced by the same profound, sterile silence Ilara had described in her frantic, magical message. It had traveled from the frozen peaks of Skyrim to the sun-scorched sands of elsewhere. This was not a curse, it was a plague of the soul. The air in the ragged flagon was thick with the stench of damp stone, cheap ale, and quiet desperation. It was a world away from the scholarly austerity of the Arcanium, and Ilara Velith felt every hostile glare as she moved through the flickering torchlight of the cistern. Her fine college robes were a beacon in this den of thieves and cutthroats, but her face, set like flint, promised no easy plunder. She was looking for a ghost, a disgraced Telvanni master named Drevis Nerethi, who had been cast out for experiments that skirted the very edge of blasphemy. Rumor said his obsession was the magic of unmaking. She found him in a shadowed alcove, hunched over a stained wooden table, his face half hidden by a dark hood. The air around him shimmered with faint, almost invisible warding spells, a testament to his paranoia. He didn't look up as she approached, his attention fixed on a blackened soul gem he turned over and over in his gnarled fingers. "Master Nerethi?" Ilara's voice was steady, cutting through the low murmur of the flagon. "I am no one's master," he rasped without raising his head. "And I have nothing for the high-minded puppets of Winterhold. Go peddle your principles elsewhere." "I'm not here for principles. I'm here for knowledge," she said, placing a hand on the table. "I need to know about the Anuic unnaming." His hand froze. Slowly, he lifted his head, and 2 malevolent red eyes fixed on her from the darkness of his hood. A slow, chilling smile spread across his lips. "So the old nightmares have crawled out of their tombs. You are playing with fire far beyond your understanding, little scholar. That knowledge has a price higher than all the gold in your immaculate college." "I have no gold," Ilara stated plainly, "but I know where the tome of unfettered energies lies, the one you lost when your tower fell." The smile vanished. His eyes narrowed with a predatory gleam. For a long moment, the only sound was the drip of water from the vaulted stone ceiling. "You have my attention," he hissed. After she described the Dwemer ruin where the tome was hidden, a place now sealed by magic he could no longer bypass, he leaned back, the wards around him seeming to dim. The unnaming, it's not a curse, it's a cleansing. It doesn't steal memory. It erases the event that created it. The soldiers in Skyrim, the catfolk in the desert, they are merely the first ripples from a stone cast into the sea of time. The spell isn't coming from that barrow. That is just an echo chamber, amplifying the effect. Where is the source? Ilara pressed, her heart pounding. A chantry of fanatics called the Silent Scriveners, hidden deep in the Velothi mountains of my homeland, he whispered, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and terror. They believe they are purifying the Mundus by unwriting its greatest tragedies, but they are fools. They are not pulling a thread from the tapestry. They are unraveling reality itself. The Velothi mountains clawed at the sky, their jagged peaks wreathed in ash-gray clouds. The journey from Riften had been a harsh one, a pilgrimage into the desolate heart of Morrowind. Ilara followed the disgraced Telvanni's cryptic directions, her own memories feeling thin and brittle like old parchment. The name of the horse she'd ridden from Winterhold was a ghost on her tongue. The face of the innkeeper in Windhelm was a fading watercolor. The closer she got, the more the world seemed to shed its own details. She found the chantry not by a landmark but by a void. It was a place where the landscape simply stopped. A cave mouth, veiled by an illusion that did not show a rock wall, but showed nothing. It was a hole in the world. Inside, the silence was absolute. It was not the quiet of an empty room, but a profound, active nullity that pressed in on her ears and seemed to dampen the very thoughts in her head. The chantry was carved from obsidian, its stark angular halls devoid of any decoration. There were no tapestries, no statues, no offerings. This was not a place of worship, but a place of erasure. Shadowy figures drifted through the corridors, the silent scriveners. They were cloaked and hooded, their faces obscured, but Ilara could feel their emptiness. They were vessels, their own identities long since offered to their cause. She followed them to the central chamber, a vast cavern where the oppressive silence was focused into a humming, visible distortion in the air. In the center of the room, a colossal, pulsating crystal, black as a starless night, hovered above the floor. Around it, the scriveners stood in a perfect circle, their hands outstretched, not chanting but thinking a single unified command of annihilation. Pinned within the heart of the crystal was a flicker of impossible energy, a consciousness that writhed against its bonds. And Ilara finally understood. They were not erasing a tragedy. They were unwriting a god. A forgotten Daedric prince, whose name and sphere had been lost to time, was being methodically unnamed from the Orbis. The spell was a cascading paradox. By erasing the prince, they were also erasing its influence on history. Every war it had started, every artifact it had forged, every mortal it had touched. And the memories of those events, of those people, were unraveling as a consequence. The Stormcloaks, the Khajiit caravan, they were just the first threads to be pulled from the tapestry. The scriveners believed they were creating a perfect, unblemished world. Instead, they were unnaming reality itself, creating a perfect, silent nothing. The silence in the heart of the chantry was a physical force, a pressure that squeezed the air from Ilara's lungs and the thoughts from her mind. The great black crystal pulsed with a rhythm of anti-life, each beat erasing a million forgotten moments across Tamriel. The scriveners were statues of devotion, their life force siphoned into the grand unmaking. Ilara could feel her own past fraying. The scent of the library in Winterhold, the texture of the first scroll she ever translated. They were becoming abstract concepts, words without sensation. To fight them would be like striking a storm. She could not destroy the void, she could only fill it. Drevis's words echoed in the silence of her mind. To speak its name is to risk invoking its opposite. The scriveners were unnaming a god with a unified thought of nothingness. She had to give it a new name, a memory so powerful it could anchor it back to the Mundus. She took a step toward the crystal, and the pressure intensified. The name of her mother, a sharp, beautiful sound, dissolved into a vague warmth in her chest. Another step, The face of her first mentor at the college became a featureless blur. She was walking into the heart of oblivion, shedding her own identity with every inch she gained. The world outside the chantry had vanished from her mind. There was only this chamber, this pulsing darkness, and a fading imperative to act. What memory was strong enough to save the world? Love? Hate? They were too complex, too tied to other people whose names she no longer knew. She needed something pure, something fundamental. She reached the edge of the dais, her hand outstretched, her entire being screaming at the encroaching emptiness. She was Ilara Velith, a scholar, a Dunmer. Why? The reason was gone. With her last shred of will, she plunged her hand into the cold, humming field of energy surrounding the crystal. She did not search for a memory of a person or a place, but for a feeling. She dug past the fading layers of her life and found the first primordial spark of her soul. The moment she, as a child in Mournhold, had looked up at the twin moons and felt a sense of wonder so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The feeling of being small in a vast, magical and unknowable world. The desire not to conquer it or rule it, but simply to understand it. She focused on that single perfect point of light in her dissolving mind and pushed it into the crystal. She gave the forgotten prince its new name, Wonder. A sound cracked through the chamber, the sound of a shattering universe. A wave of pure, chaotic energy erupted from the crystal, not of destruction, but of creation. Light, sound, color, and sensation flooded back into the world. The scriveners crumpled to the floor, their empty vessels unable to contain the sudden torrent of reality. The black crystal flared with the brilliant silver light of a newborn star, then went dark and inert, falling to the stone floor with a final, mundane clatter. Ilara stumbled back, gasping as the air returned to her lungs. She looked around the now silent chamber, her mind feeling both full and hollow. She knew her name. She knew she was a scholar. But the memory of the moons, the beautiful childish awe that had set her on her path, was gone. It no longer belonged to her. It had been her last, greatest memory, and she had given it to save all the others.